Hello and welcome to this video where the subject is text and text effects in Photoshop. My name's Barry Beckham. Wow, where do I start with this subject? In this video we can only dip our toe into what Photoshop text can offer. It's so comprehensive that I could make a whole series of videos just on Photoshop text. In fact, I may even do that at some stage, and I'm sure there are books dedicated to this subject. Text in Photoshop is always created on its own new layer, and it remains live and editable until we decide otherwise. Don't worry too much about the initial color to start with. I think we have a good way to change that a little later. Let's go to the text tool on the toolbar. I'm going to click and hold at the bottom right corner, and you'll notice there's 4 tools in there. I think I've used this one for nearly all the work I've done with the type tool. Very rarely use the vertical type tool, and I don't use either of these because I think there's a better way of achieving the same thing. So for what we're going to do here, we only really need to concentrate on the horizontal type tool. As soon as I click into the picture surface, you'll see the text layer created on the right hand side just above our background thumbnail, and then I can type my text. Now to commit this text, because we can still see the cursor flashing within the text, we either hit the tick, which is just to the right of the center at the top of the screen, or we can hit the enter key. But just before we do that, if I move my cursor just a little way away from the text, it changes to the move tool and enables us to click and drag. Photoshop knows that after typing the text, the very next thing we're likely to want to do is to position it, so it gives us this clever option. To be able to change the font style, the size, and 1 or 2 other options, we need to highlight the text just as we would in a Word program. Then the options we'll find all at the top of the screen. We have a number here, sharp, crisp, strong. We have the size. We have other options here. I think the 2 we're likely to use most are the size and the font. When I bring the fonts down, you can see all of them here. And as I go down, as I mouse over them, you can see the font changing, although bad luck for me, it's behind the panel itself. We're going to stay with a pretty basic, something like Arial for this demonstration. And of course, we can use the drop-down options here to change the font size. But of course, you'll notice in this drop-down window, we only seem to go to 72, but I had 140 something before. Well, you can see what we can do here. We can quite easily overtype that value, hit the enter key or the tick, and the text is made larger. There is another way to increase the font size. If I click with my text tool into the text, hold the control key, you'll see a bounding box appear. So I could drag this up and out, and as you can see, I can make it long and thin, or I can make it deep and wide. The choice really is an individual one, but we hit the tick when we're happy with the change. And at any time you want to move the text, if I just touch my control key, you'll notice that once the text tool has been committed, I can click and move it into position, and it nicely fits into that little hole in the tree there. If you look across to the layers on the right hand side, you can now see that the text layer reflects the word we typed. Let's add some color and some effects to the text by going down to the bottom and clicking on the effects. We've got a number here, and if we know exactly what we wanted to do, color overlay for example, I could go directly to that. But the blending options brings them all up anyway, so let's bring them all up on screen before we make any change. I'll move the panel over to the right so we can see the text, and we can also see the layers at the same time. There's a lot of options within this layer style window. We're just going to look at one or two. The first thing I need to say is that we can tick any of these boxes. Let me just pick stroke for a moment. I'm going to tick the stroke, and we see whatever value was last applied on this computer, it'll be applied here, and you can see there's a thin line around the outside of the word tree. But if I want to adjust the parameters of the stroke, then I need to click just alongside, and all of the options open up on the right hand side. So if we just look at this briefly from the top down, the size of the line around the outside of the text is 2 pixels. It's positioned on the inside of the text as opposed to center or outside. The blend mode is normal, the opacity is full, and the color is a light gray. Let me change this to white so you can see it a little more clearly, and I'll increase this size to 4, let's say. Now the good thing about what we're doing here with the effects, we can see what we've added to the text layer. It sits just below in the layers palette, and all of these changes remain live just as the text does until we decide to change it. So here, let me remove the tick from the stroke, and let's look at the color overlay. When I click the color overlay, I'll get the last color that was used here, and when I click the panel, then the options open up on the right. If I click the color picker here, I get all of the normal choices that we would have on our computer, millions of shades of color. But better than that, if I move my cursor off the color picker, you can see we have an eyedropper tool. So I could click anywhere in the picture to select a color which is perhaps a little bit more harmonious within the image itself. Let's pick up a nice warm color from within the image. I think I'll live with that just for a little while, and I'll click OK. Now we can add one effect to another. So if I wanted to go back to my stroke now and click it, I get my white outline. If I wanted to change it, let's change it to black, as it may seem more appropriate here. There you can see it's quick and easy to do. If you hit the little plus here, you can actually apply a different stroke with a different set of settings. But I'm sort of guessing that this is more something for a graphic artist, maybe more than a photographer. But we may be interested in the bevel and emboss. If we tick this, we'll see the last setting applied, and you can see it gives a sort of a rounded effect to the text, and it still retains the color and the stroke. But if I highlight this, then I get to change all manner of things, which I'm going to encourage you to come in and look at one evening when you've got an hour to spare. All I'm going to do here is just drop this down a little bit, just so I get a bit of rounding on the edge, and I'm happy with that. But you can see also we can even apply texture, and when I open this up, you can see the sort of texture we have. We can decide how strong it is, how weak it is, how big it is, and we've got many others here and loads here to choose from. Now you can see perhaps you're going to need a little bit more than an hour to investigate what's in the layer styles. I'll take away the texture on this particular occasion, and we'll just leave that nice shape. And the last one I'd like to take you to, which we're likely to use, is the drop shadow. Let me just drop the stroke off for a moment so you can see the drop shadow better. I'll highlight it. Again, lots of options here, but the ones we're most interested in are these three sliders here, and also the direction. Let me just push the size up, and you can see we blur it quite a bit, and we can always highlight these values and overtype them. We can choose the distance, and we can choose the spread, and we can choose, maybe on this occasion, a little more, and we've got an opacity, plus we can choose the direction of the light. But I think that looks pretty good. Now, I thought I'd turn my stroke off a few moments ago, but I think I probably did it a little too quick, never paid attention, and I missed it. But let's just turn it off so you can see the drop shadow without the line. But it does look quite nice, so I'll return it. And just for the moment, I'll click OK to the changes that I've made. You can see quite a string of them now hanging down. We can tidy them up by just tucking them away. But sometimes, as long as we're not pushed for space, I would suggest we just leave them where they are. They're easy to get to. Now, just suppose that I wanted another line of text. It's quite common. We start to do something, then think of something else we'd like to try. Well, once I've got a number of effects hanging on here, probably one of the easiest ways to do it is just to copy this text. We can do that very easily with Ctrl J. We can use the Move tool on the toolbox to move the text down. Then we can pick up the Text tool, we could overtype it, and we can change the wording. I'll just put something in here. It looks rather big, but we'll leave it at the moment. Now let's just assume that we'd typed the word grass and we hadn't made a copy. We wouldn't have all of these effects on the bottom, and this also gives me the opportunity of demonstrating how we can remove them. We just drop them in the bin. So if I just typed that text there, let's drop it into the grass. If I then wanted to apply the effects I've got on the word tree, then all I've got to do is hold the Alt key and click and drag the effects from one layer to another. If I just wanted to move the effects from one layer to another, just omit the Alt key and you can just drop them from one to the other. Now let me get rid of the layer called grass, and it's highlighted, so the delete key will take care of that for me. And I need to go over to the toolbox because I need to click on the T for the text layer to get access to the warp text, which will appear at the center top of the screen. This is the icon I'm looking for, and when I click that, a number of other options will open up. Let me hit the drop down here and choose the arc. Well, you can see what it does. I can click and move this around, but I get the opportunity to make the arc greater or even go the other way, and I can make all sorts of other changes too. And when I'm happy with that, let me just move it onto the picture space. I can click OK. Now, despite all of the effects I have and the warp, I can still click and drag, and I can type a new name, correct a spelling, or change it completely. And when I'm happy, I can hit the tick to commit any changes I put in, and all of the warping and the effects will all be retained just as they are now. Sometimes though we may want to remove the warp, and that was the top option. When I click the panel, we can remove it. OK to that. I'll pick up my Move tool and just move my tree text back into position. Now let me briefly introduce you to styles, and I do mean briefly because there's a lot of them. I'm going to pick up the effects here and I'm going to drag them in the bin. So we're just going to go back to our basic text. Now we'll find the styles in our Windows menu. Down the bottom we can pick up the styles and we can drop them in here if we want, but I'll leave them on screen. I think I'll get rid of that one which seems to have been attached to it. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger by clicking and dragging. You can see there's quite a few there. Let me just select one or two of these. I'll pick this one. Looks a little bit way out, but I'll select it anyway. You can see what we get with that entire style. We get another set of effects, but of course you can think of these as presets, I suppose, because we either accept what we can see here, or we can take aspects of it and we can change them simply by double clicking, and the effect will open up and we can make adjustments. Now, as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I've moved the styles a little bit to make a bit of room, so when I go to the option at the top right of this window, we get to see all of the options we have, and we've got many different groups. What you're seeing here is just one of these groups. Let me select one of them. Let's try glass buttons. Now here we're being asked, do we want to replace these ones here? And in that case we click OK. But if we wanted to add one set to another, we click Append. I'll replace them here, and you can see now all of the glass buttons. Let's try one of the others, Text Effects. And as an example, let me click this one, and you can see the effect you get with that one. Not entirely attractive for what we would want in a photograph, I'm suggesting, but it's one of a number of options, and of course we can always change it over on the right hand side. Here I'm looking in the web styles, and there's a couple of attractive ones here, as you can see. The spinning round of the screen just indicates that I've recreated my text and applied one or two effects to it myself, like we did right at the start: drop shadow, color overlay, stroke, bevel and emboss. What I'd like to do is apply a layer mask here to see if I can make my text appear to sink into the grass. So if I select black as my foreground color, a brush from the toolbox, a basic soft edge brush, I'll leave the opacity and flow at 100% for a moment. When I start to mask, it all goes a little wrong because of the effects that I've got attached over there. I'm going to reset my mask just for a moment. I'll flood it with white, Control Backspace. But what I need to do is to rasterize these effects. So if I go to the right of my thumbnail, right click, I can rasterize my type, but I want to rasterize just the layer style. But when I do that, I seem to lose everything. So it's no problem. I can just go back and reselect my mask. Because once I do this, I should have my text in the position that I want it. Now I'm going to click and drag to make the text bigger, and I'm going to start to blend it in. I'm just going to do the bottom part quite quickly using 100% flow, but I suppose once I get near the edge I could drop my flow down to about 10% and just do a little bit more careful work here, and I may even make my brush a little smaller. I think you get the idea. I just want to give you a flavour of some of the things you can do with text. Control 0, and there you can see we can have our text almost just growing out of the grasses. Now while I've got this on screen, I'm going to select my mask, flood it with white. I'm going to pick up my move tool and I'm going to move my text somewhere around here, perhaps something like that, because there is another effect we can create. Maybe that's not such a good one. I'll do it there. What I'm going to do here is use my mask to make it look as though the letter E here is looped around the tree. So I need to zoom in nice and large. I need to pick up black and my brush. I'm going to be working quite quick here, so I'm going to push my flow rate up. I'm just going to mask along the edge of the tree and through there. There's lots of things you can do with this technique, but given the breadth of these text tools, I can't spend too much time on this, or we'll end up with a video a couple of hours long. But there's another idea where you can use a mask with your text and loop it around objects in your picture. If you're an audio-visual enthusiast, then here's a great idea for titles. You can see what I've done here, just new text, no styles or no effects. When we first looked at the text tool, we noticed there were two other tools down the bottom, vertical type mask tool and horizontal, and I said don't worry about those, I think I've got a better way to create a selection, which is what those two tools do. If I take you to the layers and I hold the control key and click the sky, we get an instant selection of it. If I then turn that off and I selected my image, what I could do is copy the text from the sky. Now when I hit Ctrl J to do that, you'll see it appear in the layers on the right, but of course you won't see nothing in the sky because it's copied the pixels and pasted them directly over the copied pixels, so we see nothing. Until of course we may decide to put some effects onto the word sky, and then it will become visible. For example, bevel and emboss, stroke, drop shadow, and we've got it taken perfectly from the sky. But even if I cancelled these, of course it would become visible if I moved it from its current position. And then we can see it clearly. And of course we could still have all of the effects on there if we wanted to. Now you can see the problem I have here. My video is already up to 20 minutes plus, so I need to bring this to a close. I'll go back to my history here, and I'm just going to move the sky back into that position I created it. It's still there, but we just can't see it for a moment. I'm going to click and hold the control key to make a selection of the sky, because we can select any layer by doing that. Doesn't have to be the text layer, but we do still have that up our sleeve in case we wanted to make a change. But now I'm going to turn both of those off. I'm going to remove the lock here from the layer because I'm going to cut a hole into the tree image you can see here. I'm going to choose Control X to do that. So what we could do now, if we wanted to, is create a new blank layer, drag that beneath the image, maybe flood it with white, but of course it doesn't have to be white. When I select the layer, what I could do then is apply some effects to that. So if we brought the blending options up again and maybe chose drop shadow, we can start to create an effect where it almost looks as though a hole has been cut into the picture surface and we're looking through it in a 3D way. Now I think we've probably touched on 10% of the tools and about 1% of the creative possibilities. If you're a Photoshop user, then at some stage you are almost certain to want to create some sort of text and text effects on your images. I think I've said at least once through this video, if you're into digital audio visual, then text effects can be used for titles, end credits, and it's nice to apply a bit of style and creativity to those.